I was 26 years old, working double shifts at Romano's Italian restaurant to help pay for my mother's medical bills, when a woman in a designer suit threw scalding coffee in my face because I took an extra 30 seconds to refill her cup. I cleaned up the mess, apologized for the inconvenience, and went back to serving tables with coffee stains on my uniform and burns on my cheek. I had no idea that the woman who humiliated me was actually my fiancé's estranged mother, or that she would walk into my wedding the following week expecting to reconnect with the son she abandoned 15 years ago, only to discover that the incompetent waitress she had berated was about to become her daughter-in-law. Before we dive into this incredible story, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. I always love seeing our global community come together. If you enjoy stories about karma, hidden connections, and how treating people with dignity matters more than anyone realizes, make sure to hit that like button right now and subscribe to our channel so you never miss these inspiring true stories. Now, let me take you back to that exhausting Thursday afternoon 3 weeks ago when I was just another overworked waitress trying to make it through another shift without breaking down. The lunch rush at Romano's had finally started to ease when she walked in. I remember noticing her immediately because everything about her screamed wealth and impatience. Her Chanel suit was immaculate, her leather handbag probably cost more than I made in 3 months, and her heels clicked against the tile floor with the sharp, aggressive rhythm of someone who expected the world to move at her pace. She chose a table in my section, barely glancing at me as she sat down and immediately pulled out her phone, her perfectly manicured nails flying across the screen. I approached with my standard greeting, the one I had perfected over 2 years of serving entitled customers who looked through me like I was invisible. "Good afternoon. Welcome to Romano's. Can I start you off with something to drink?" My voice was warm despite the exhaustion that had settled into my bones after 6 hours on my feet. I had another shift starting in 4 hours at the coffee shop down the street, and my feet were already throbbing in the cheap shoes I could barely afford to replace. She didn't look up from her phone. "Coffee. Black. And I'm in a hurry, so don't take forever." Her voice was cold, dismissive, the tone of someone who had forgotten that the people serving her were actually human beings with their own struggles and stories. I nodded, even though she wasn't looking at me to see it, and headed to the coffee station. The lunch rush had depleted our fresh pots, and I had to brew a new one. I worked as quickly as I could, my hands moving with the efficiency that came from thousands of repetitions. While the coffee brewed, I delivered food to 2 other tables, refilled water glasses, and cleared dirty plates. Every movement was calculated to maximize efficiency because I knew that every minute counted, every tip mattered. My mother's medical bills from her cancer treatment had piled up to the point where I was working 3 jobs just to keep us from drowning in debt. The coffee finished brewing, and I poured it carefully into our nicest cup, the kind we reserved for customers who looked like they might leave decent tips. I added a small biscotti on the side, a touch I always included even though it wasn't required. My grandmother, who had raised me after my father left and before she passed away 5 years ago, had taught me that kindness costs nothing and that treating every person with dignity was the mark of true character. Even when customers were rude, even when they treated me like I was beneath them, I tried to remember her words and respond with grace. I brought the coffee to the woman's table, setting it down gently with a smile. "Here you go. Can I get you anything else? Would you like to see a menu?" She finally looked up from her phone, and her eyes swept over me with the kind of assessment that made me feel like I was being appraised and found wanting. Her gaze lingered on my worn uniform, the coffee stains from earlier in my shift, the way my hair was falling out of its ponytail. I saw the judgment in her expression, the casual contempt that wealthy people sometimes have for those who serve them. "How long did that take?" she asked, her voice sharp. I glanced at the small watch on my wrist, the one my grandmother had given me before she died. "About 3 minutes. I had to brew a fresh pot to make sure it was hot for you." 3 minutes? She said it like I had just confessed to a crime. I said I was in a hurry. 3 minutes is unacceptable. She picked up the coffee cup, took a single sip, and then her face twisted in disgust. "And it's not even hot enough. This is pathetic service." My heart sank. I had checked the temperature myself. The coffee was hot, well within the standard range, but I had learned long ago that arguing with customers, especially ones like this, was pointless. "I'm so sorry. Let me get you a fresh cup right away." "Don't bother." She pushed the cup away from her with such force that coffee sloshed over the rim onto the white tablecloth. "I don't have time for this incompetence. Do you have any idea how valuable my time is? Every minute I waste here because you can't do your job properly costs me money." I felt my face flush with embarrassment as other diners began to turn and stare. My manager, Tony, was watching from behind the bar, his expression concerned. I knew he would support me, but I also knew that scenes like this were bad for business. "I truly apologize. Please, let me make this right. I can have a fresh cup for you in less than a minute." She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You know what? I've had enough of your excuses." And then, before I could process what was happening, she picked up the coffee cup and threw the contents directly at my face. The hot liquid hit me like a slap, burning my cheek and neck, soaking into my uniform. I gasped, more from shock than pain, though the coffee was hot enough to hurt. The restaurant went completely silent. Everyone was staring. I stood there, dripping with coffee, my face burning, my eyes stinging with tears that I refused to let fall. I could feel the humiliation radiating through every cell of my body. The woman grabbed her designer handbag and looked at me with cold satisfaction. "Maybe next time you'll learn to do your job properly." She threw a $5 bill on the table, which didn't even cover the cost of the coffee, and walked out of the restaurant with her head held high, as if she had just taught me some valuable lesson about excellence and efficiency. The moment she was gone, Tony rushed over with a stack of napkins. "Emma, oh my God, are you okay? Did she burn you? We need to get you cleaned up. That woman is insane. I'm calling the police." I took the napkins from him, dabbing at my face and uniform. The burns weren't serious, just superficial redness that would fade in a few hours. But the humiliation felt like it would last forever. "No, don't call the police. It's fine. I'm fine." "It's not fine. She assaulted you. That's a crime." "Tony, please. I just want to clean up and finish my shift. I can't afford to make a big deal out of this." The truth was that I couldn't afford to lose this job. Couldn't afford to be known as the waitress who caused drama. Couldn't afford anything that might jeopardize my income. My mother's next round of treatment started in 2 weeks, and I was still $3,000 short of what I needed. My coworker Maria came over with a clean uniform. "Come on, honey. Let's get you changed." That woman was a monster. "I got her license plate number if you change your mind about reporting her." I followed Maria to the back room, my hands shaking as I peeled off the coffee-soaked uniform. My phone buzzed in my locker, and I saw a text from my fiancé, David. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Love you." The message made me smile despite everything that had just happened. David was the best thing in my life, the man who had proposed to me 6 months ago in the most perfect, simple way, getting down on one knee in the park where we had our first date. He worked as a software engineer at a startup, and while he made decent money, he was also paying off his own student loans and helping support his younger sister through college. We were getting married in 10 days, a small ceremony at the community center with just close friends and family. We couldn't afford anything fancy, but I didn't care. All I wanted was to marry the man I loved and build a life together. I changed into the clean uniform and splashed cold water on my face, studying my reflection in the mirror. The burn on my cheek was visible but not terrible. I could cover it with makeup. The humiliation was harder to hide. I thought about my grandmother's words, about treating everyone with dignity, about responding to cruelty with grace. The woman who threw coffee at me would probably never think about me again. To her, I was just an incompetent waitress who deserved to be put in her place. But I knew who I was. I was a woman working 3 jobs to take care of her sick mother. I was a daughter who had put her own dreams of finishing college on hold to make sure her mom got the treatment she needed. I was a fiancé who was about to marry the love of her life. I was more than what that woman saw when she looked at me. I finished my shift without incident, accepting sympathetic looks from regular customers who had witnessed the scene. Tony tried to send me home early, but I refused. I needed every hour of pay I could get. When my shift finally ended at 3, I had just enough time to grab a quick sandwich before my shift at the coffee shop started at 4. This was my life now, this constant race from one job to another, this exhaustion that lived in my bones, this feeling of never having enough time or money or energy. The coffee shop shift was mercifully uneasy, and by the time I got home at 11 that night, I was so tired I could barely stand. My mother was already asleep, and I was grateful for that. She worried about me constantly, felt guilty about the financial burden her illness had created, and I spent a lot of energy trying to convince her that everything was fine, that I was handling it, that she just needed to focus on getting better. I collapsed into bed without even taking off my makeup, too exhausted to do anything but close my eyes and pray for the strength to do it all again tomorrow. The next morning, I woke up to my alarm at 5:30, my body protesting every movement. The burn on my cheek had faded to a light pink mark that I covered with concealer. I had a morning shift at Romano's, then a few hours at the coffee shop, and then I was finally meeting David for dinner. We had so much to finalize for the wedding. The ceremony was in 9 days, and there were still a million details to handle. My maid of honor, my best friend Sarah, had been helping coordinate everything, but there was only so much she could do. David and I were handling most of it ourselves because we couldn't afford a wedding planner, or even much help. The week passed in a blur of work and wedding preparations. I barely had time to think about the coffee incident, though occasionally I would catch myself touching the faint mark on my cheek and remembering the woman's cold eyes, her casual cruelty, the way she had made me feel like I was nothing. I tried to let it go, tried to focus on the positive things in my life, but there was something about that moment that stayed with me. Maybe it was because it crystallized everything I felt about my current situation. I was invisible to people like her. My hard work, my sacrifices, my character didn't matter. All that mattered was that I was serving her, and she had the power to treat me however she wanted without consequences. David noticed that something was bothering me. We were sitting in his small apartment 3 days before the wedding, going over the final guest list, when he set down his pen and looked at me with those warm brown eyes that had first made me fall in love with him. "Emma, what's wrong? You've been distracted all week." I hesitated, not wanting to burden him with something that felt so petty in the grand scheme of things. But David had always been someone I could talk to, someone who actually listened and cared. Something happened at work last week. A customer threw hot coffee at me because she thought I was too slow. His expression shifted immediately from concern to anger. "She did what? Emma, why didn't you tell me? Did you report her? Are you okay?" "I'm fine. It wasn't that bad. Just embarrassing." I touched my cheek where the mark had finally faded completely. Tony wanted to call the police, but I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. I just wanted to forget about it. David reached across the table and took my hands in his. "You shouldn't have to deal with people treating you like that. You're the kindest, hardest working person I know. You deserve so much better than this." "I know, but this is reality right now. I need these jobs. Mom's treatments are expensive and we're so close to getting through this." Once she's in remission, once we're married and can combine our finances, things will get easier. I just have to hold on a little longer." He squeezed my hands gently. "I wish I could do more to help. I wish I could give you the wedding you deserve. The life you deserve." "You give me everything I need," I said, meaning it completely. "I don't need a fancy wedding or an expensive dress. I just need you. That's all I've ever needed." We finished going over the guest list, confirming that we had responses from everyone. It was a small group, just 35 people. My mother, my aunt and uncle, a few cousins, my friends from high school and college, David's younger sister Rebecca, a few of his friends from work, and some mutual friends we had made together. David's parents weren't on the list, and that was a complicated story that I only partially understood. He had told me that his mother had left when he was 12, disappearing from his life without explanation. His father had raised him and Rebecca alone, working multiple jobs to keep them fed and housed. His father had passed away from a heart attack 2 years ago, just a few months before David and I met. The loss still weighed heavily on him, and I knew he wished his dad could be there to see him get married. As for his mother, David rarely talked about her. I knew her name was Catherine, that she had been a corporate lawyer who prioritized her career over her family, that she had simply walked out one day and never looked back. David had tried to find her a few years ago, but she had made it clear she wasn't interested in reconnecting. The rejection had hurt him deeply, and he had decided that if she didn't want to be part of his life, he wouldn't force it. I respected his decision, even though part of me wished he could have that closure, that connection with the woman who had given him life. The night before the wedding, Sarah hosted a small gathering at her apartment for my closest friends. It wasn't a traditional bachelorette party since I didn't have the time or energy for anything elaborate, but it was perfect. We ate pizza, drank cheap wine, and laughed until our sides hurt. Sarah gave a toast that made me cry, talking about how I was the strongest person she knew, how I deserved all the happiness in the world, how she had never seen two people more perfect for each other than David and me. "To Emma," Sarah said, raising her glass, "may your marriage be filled with love, laughter, and significantly fewer customers throwing coffee at you." Everyone laughed, and I felt the warmth of friendship and love surrounding me. These were my people, the ones who had supported me through my father leaving, through my grandmother's death, through my mother's cancer diagnosis, through every struggle and setback. They had shown up for me when it mattered, and I knew they would continue to show up for the rest of my life. I went home that night feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Tomorrow I would marry David. Tomorrow I would start the next chapter of my life. Tomorrow everything would be perfect. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect September day that felt like a gift from the universe. I woke up early in the small apartment I shared with my mother, my heart racing with excitement and nerves. Mom was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with her morning tea, and when she saw me, her face lit up with a smile that reminded me of who she used to be before the cancer, before the treatments that had stolen her energy and her hair. "Good morning, my beautiful bride," she said, standing up to embrace me. She had lost so much weight that I could feel her bones through her robe, but her hug was still strong, still full of the love that had sustained me my entire life. "Morning, Mom. How are you feeling?" "I feel wonderful. I wouldn't miss this day for anything in the world." She pulled back to look at me, her eyes shining with tears. "Your grandmother would be so proud of you. She always said you had the biggest heart of anyone she knew." "I learned from the best," I said, my own eyes filling with tears. "Both of you taught me what really matters in life." Sarah arrived at 9 with my dress, a simple but elegant ivory gown we had found at a consignment shop for $200. It wasn't designer, it wasn't new, but when I put it on, I felt like a princess. Sarah did my hair and makeup, transforming me into a version of myself that looked polished and confident, someone who belonged at her own wedding. The ceremony was at 2, and by noon we were loading everything into Sarah's car to head to the community center. My mother sat in the front seat, and I sat in the back, my dress carefully arranged to avoid wrinkles. I felt like I was floating, like this couldn't possibly be real, like I was about to marry the man of my dreams in front of everyone I loved. We arrived at the community center at 12:30, and the next hour was a whirlwind of activity. The space looked beautiful. David's friends had decorated with simple white flowers and fairy lights, transforming the basic room into something magical. The chairs were arranged in neat rows, and there was a small arch at the front where David and I would stand to exchange our vows. I was in the small preparation room, Sarah making final adjustments to my hair, when there was a knock at the door. Sarah opened it to find David's sister Rebecca, looking flustered and concerned. "Emma, can I talk to you for a second?" "Of course. What's wrong?" Rebecca came in and closed the door behind her. She was 22, a college senior studying engineering, and I had grown close to her over the past year. She was smart, funny, and Emma, he looks really upset. I don't know what she said to him, but I'm worried. I stood up, my mind racing. David's mother, the woman who had abandoned him 15 years ago, had chosen today, his wedding day, to show up. "Where are they?" "By the back entrance." "Emma, I don't think you should go out there. This is between David and her. You should stay here and stay calm. It's your wedding day." But I couldn't stay calm. David was upset, and I needed to be there for him. "I'll just check on him. Make sure he's okay." I left the preparation room and walked down the hallway toward the back entrance, my heart pounding. I could hear voices before I saw them. A woman's voice that sounded oddly familiar, though I couldn't place it. "David, please. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm here now. I want to be part of your life. I want to meet the woman you're marrying." "You don't get to do this." David's voice was tight with emotion. "You don't get to show up after 15 years and act like you have any right to be here. You left. You chose your career over your family. You made it very clear that Rebecca and I didn't matter to you." "That's not true." I was struggling. I was drowning in expectations and pressure, and I made terrible choices. But I've changed. I've spent years regretting what I did, and I want to make amends. I turned the corner and saw them standing by the exit door. David had his back to me, his shoulders tense, and the woman facing him, the woman claiming to be his mother, was wearing a designer suit and expensive heels. My blood ran cold as recognition hit me like a physical blow. It was her. The woman from the restaurant. The woman who had thrown coffee in my face. I must have made some sound because they both turned to look at me. David's face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed, and the woman, Catherine, looked at me with polite curiosity that shifted to confusion as she studied my face. "Emma," David said, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I told her to leave, but she won't." Catherine's eyes were still on me, and I could see the moment recognition dawned. Her expression shifted from confusion to shock to something that might have been horror. "You," she said softly. "You're the waitress from Romano's." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implications. David looked between us, confused. "What? You two know each other?" I couldn't speak. My mind was reeling, trying to process this impossible coincidence. The woman who had humiliated me, who had thrown hot coffee in my face and called me incompetent, was David's mother. The mother who had abandoned him. The mother he had spent years trying to forget. Catherine's face had gone pale. I don't understand. You're marrying David? You're Emma? You know her? David asked me, and I could hear the confusion and concern in his voice. I finally found my voice, though it came out shaky. She came into Romano's last week. She threw coffee at me because she thought I was too slow. David's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to fury in the span of seconds. He turned to his mother, and I had never seen him look so angry. You did what? Catherine was shaking her head, her hands raised as if to ward off the accusation. I didn't know. I had no idea she was... I thought she was just what? David's voice was cold. Just a waitress? Just someone beneath you? Just someone who didn't deserve basic human decency? David, please, let me explain. Explain what? That you assaulted my fiancé? That you treated the woman I love like garbage? That you haven't changed at all from the person who walked out on her own children because they weren't important enough? People were starting to gather in the hallway, drawn by the raised voices. I could see Sarah and Rebecca, could see some of our guests peeking around corners. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and it was turning into a nightmare. Catherine looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes that might have been genuine remorse. I am so sorry. If I had known who you were, I never would have. But you didn't know who I was, I said quietly, finding my voice and my strength. And that's exactly the point, isn't it? You treated me that way because you thought I was just a waitress. You thought you could throw coffee at me and walk away because I didn't matter to you. The only thing that's changed is that now you know I'm marrying your son, and suddenly my humanity is relevant to you. That's not fair, isn't it? I took a step closer to her, and I saw her flinch slightly. Good. She should flinch. You don't even remember it, do you? You don't remember how you made me feel. You don't remember the burns on my face or the humiliation or the way everyone in that restaurant stared at me. It was just another Tuesday for you, just another moment of impatience with someone you considered beneath you. But for me, it was one more reminder that people like you will never see people like me as human beings who deserve respect. David moved to stand beside me, his hand finding mine. I want you to leave. Now. You're not welcome at my wedding. You're not welcome in my life. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. David, please. I came here to make amends, to try to rebuild our relationship. I know I've made terrible mistakes, but I'm your mother. Doesn't that count for something? You stopped being my mother the day you walked out, David said, his voice steady despite the emotion I could feel radiating from him. A mother doesn't abandon her children. A mother doesn't show up 15 years later expecting forgiveness. And a mother definitely doesn't assault her son's fiancé and then act like it doesn't matter. I said I was sorry. Sorry isn't enough. Sorry doesn't undo what you did to Emma. Sorry doesn't undo what you did to Rebecca and me. You had 15 years to be sorry, 15 years to reach out, 15 years to show that you cared. You chose not to. And now you show up on my wedding day. And within 5 minutes, I find out you assaulted my fiancé. That tells me everything I need to know about who you really are. I squeezed David's hand, drawing strength from his presence beside me. I looked at Catherine, really looked at her, and I saw something I hadn't seen in the restaurant. I saw a woman who was deeply unhappy, who had built her life around success and status and material wealth, and who had discovered too late that none of it filled the emptiness inside her. I saw a woman who had made terrible choices and was now facing the consequences of those choices. And despite everything she had done to me, despite the humiliation and the pain, I felt something unexpected. I felt pity. You should go, I said gently. This isn't the time or place for this conversation. David and I are getting married today, and we're going to celebrate with the people who have actually been there for us, the people who showed up when it mattered. If you genuinely want to make amends, if you genuinely want to be part of David's life, then you need to prove it through actions, not just words. But that's going to take time, and it's going to require you to actually change who you are as a person. Catherine looked at me with something like wonder. You're giving me another chance? After what I did? I'm not giving you anything, I said. I'm just telling you the truth. Whether you do anything with that truth is up to you. But right now, you need to leave. This is my wedding day, and I'm not going to let you ruin it. She nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. She looked at David one more time, and I could see the desperate hope in her eyes, the longing for forgiveness and connection. But David's expression was closed off, and I knew it would take more than tears to reach him. Catherine turned and walked toward the exit, her expensive heels clicking against the floor. At the door, she paused and looked back. Emma, I truly am sorry. For everything. You deserved better from me. And then she was gone. The hallway was silent. David pulled me into his arms, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. I could feel him shaking, could feel the years of pain and abandonment pouring out of him. I'm so sorry, he whispered against my hair. I'm so sorry she did that to you. I'm so sorry she showed up today. This is all my fault. Hey, I said, pulling back to look at him. None of this is your fault. You didn't choose your mother. You didn't choose her actions. All you can choose is how you respond, and you responded perfectly. You stood up for me. You protected me. That's all I need. Sarah appeared beside us, her expression fierce. Okay, that was insane, but we have a wedding to finish. Emma, you look stunning. David, you clean up nice. Can we please get you two married now before anything else dramatic happens? I laughed, the sound breaking the tension that had been building in my chest. Yes, let's get married. The next 30 minutes were a blur of final preparations. I touched up my makeup, which had smudged slightly during the confrontation. David composed himself, though I could see the lingering pain in his eyes. Rebecca gave him a long hug, whispering something I couldn't hear that made him nod and take a deep breath. At exactly 2:00, the music started. I stood at the back of the room with my mother on one side and my uncle on the other, both of them ready to walk me down the aisle. The room was full of people who loved us, people who had shown up, people who mattered. And at the front, standing under the arch of white flowers, was David. He was wearing a simple black suit that he had bought specifically for this day, and when his eyes met mine, everything else fell away. The drama with his mother, the coffee incident, the exhaustion and stress of the past few weeks, all of it disappeared. All I could see was the man I loved, the man I was about to marry, the man I would spend the rest of my life with. I walked down the aisle, my mother squeezing my arm with surprising strength, my uncle beaming with pride. When I reached David, he took my hands in his, and I could see tears in his eyes. You're so beautiful, he whispered. So are you, I whispered back. The ceremony was simple and perfect. We had written our own vows, and when it was my turn to speak, I looked into David's eyes and said the words I had been practicing for weeks. David, you are my best friend, my partner, my home. You see me when others look through me. You value me when others dismiss me. You love me not despite my struggles, but because of who I am in the midst of those struggles. I promise to stand by you, to support you, to choose you every single day for the rest of my life. I promise to be the partner you deserve, the wife who sees you and values you and loves you with everything I have. David's vows were equally beautiful, and by the time he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. When the officiant finally said, "You may kiss the bride," David pulled me close and kissed me with a tenderness that made my heart feel like it might burst. We were married. Despite everything, despite the drama and the pain and the unexpected appearance of David's mother, we were married. And as we walked back down the aisle, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. This was right. This was exactly where I was supposed to be. The reception was held in the same room, and it was everything I had hoped for. The food was simple but delicious, prepared by friends who owned a small catering business and had given us a significant discount. The cake was homemade by Sarah's mother, a beautiful two-tier creation with simple white frosting and fresh flowers. We had a playlist instead of a DJ, and when our first dance song came on, David and I swayed together in the middle of the floor while our friends and family watched with smiles on their faces. "I love you," David whispered as we danced. "Thank you for handling my mother with such grace. You're a better person than I am. I love you too. And I'm not better than you. I just know what it's like to be invisible, to be dismissed. I don't want to become the kind of person who treats others that way, no matter what they've done to me." "That's exactly why you're better than me," he said with a small smile. "And that's exactly why I'm the luckiest man alive." The rest of the reception passed in a happy blur. We cut the cake, we danced with our friends, we laughed and celebrated and soaked in every moment. My mother gave a toast that made everyone cry, talking about how proud she was of the woman I had become, how grateful she was to have David as a son-in-law, how she knew my grandmother was watching from heaven with joy in her heart. As the evening wound down and guests started to leave, I found myself sitting at one of the tables with Sarah, both of us exhausted and happy. "That was quite a day," Sarah said, kicking off her heels with a sigh of relief. "That's an understatement. Are you okay? With everything that happened with David's mother?" I thought about the question, really considered it. Yeah, I think I am. It was shocking and painful. But in a weird way, I'm glad it happened. David got the closure he needed. He got to stand up to her and set boundaries. And I got to see that my choice to respond with dignity and grace, even when someone treats me terribly, matters. It might not change that person, but it defines who I am. You're pretty amazing, you know that? I'm just trying to be the person my grandmother raised me to be. David appeared beside us, reaching for my hand. "Ready to go? Our chariot awaits." I laughed. Our chariot was David's 10-year-old Honda Civic, decorated with tin cans and "just married" written across the back window in washable paint. We weren't going on a honeymoon because we couldn't afford it, but we had booked a single night at a nice hotel downtown, a small luxury that felt extravagant given our usual budget. We said our goodbyes, hugged our friends and family, and headed out to the car. As David drove us toward the hotel, I leaned my head against his shoulder and felt a contentment I hadn't felt in years. We were married. We were together. We had survived the drama and the pain and come out stronger on the other side. The hotel room was beautiful, with a king-size bed and a view of the city lights. We ordered room service, something we never did because it was too expensive, and ate overpriced burgers while sitting on the bed in our wedding clothes. We talked about the day, laughing about the good parts and processing the difficult parts. We talked about our future, about our dreams, about the life we wanted to build together. "Do you think she'll actually try to change?" David asked as we were getting ready for bed. "My mother, I mean. Do you think she'll actually do the work to become a better person?" "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I hope she does. Not for her sake, but for yours. You deserve to have a mother who sees your worth, who shows up for you, who treats you with the love and respect you deserve. I have you now. That's all I need. You've always had me, and you always will." We fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, exhausted and happy and hopeful about the future. The next few weeks were an adjustment period as David and I settled into married life. We moved into a slightly larger apartment that we could afford by combining our incomes. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. My mother's health continued to improve, the treatments working better than the doctors had initially hoped. I was able to cut back to 2 jobs instead of 3, giving myself a little more breathing room. About a month after the wedding, I was working an evening shift at Romano's when Tony called me into his office. "Emma, I need to talk to you about something." "Don't worry, you're not in trouble. Actually, quite the opposite." I sat down, curious and a little nervous. "What's going on?" "Do you remember that woman who threw coffee at you? The one from a few weeks before your wedding?" My stomach tightened. "Yeah, I remember. She came back yesterday. Asked to speak to the owner. I wasn't here, but Marco was, and he called me after she left. Emma, she left an envelope for you, and she made a substantial donation to the restaurant's employee assistance fund in your name." He handed me a thick manila envelope. I opened it with shaking hands and found a letter along with a check. The check was for $10,000, made out to me. I stared at it, unable to process what I was seeing. $10,000, I whispered. "This can't be real." "It's real. Read the letter." I unfolded the letter, recognizing the elegant handwriting immediately. It was from Catherine. "Dear Emma," it began. "I have spent the past month thinking about our encounter at the restaurant and at your wedding. I have spent countless hours reflecting on my behavior, my choices, and the person I have become. You were right when you said that I treated you terribly because I didn't see you as a person who mattered. You were right that I've built my life around status and success while neglecting the things that truly matter: compassion, connection, and character. I cannot undo what I did to you. I cannot take back the humiliation I caused or the pain I inflicted. But I can try to make amends, and I can try to become a better person. The enclosed check is not payment for your forgiveness. I don't expect or deserve your forgiveness. It is simply an acknowledgement that my actions had consequences, and that you deserved better from me. I have also made a donation to Romano's Employee Assistance Fund because I realize now that people like you, people who work multiple jobs to take care of their families, people who show grace under pressure, people who maintain their dignity despite being treated poorly, deserve support and recognition. I am in therapy now, working through the issues that led me to abandon my children and to treat others with such contempt. I am learning that success without compassion is empty, that wealth without kindness is worthless, that status without character is meaningless. These are lessons I should have learned decades ago, but I was too proud and too blind to see them. I don't know if David will ever forgive me, or if he will ever want me in his life. I have accepted that my choices have consequences, and that I may have lost my relationship with my son forever. But I want you to know that meeting you, seeing your grace and strength and compassion, has changed me. You showed me what real character looks like. You showed me that how we treat others, especially those we perceive as beneath us, defines who we are. Thank you for your kindness to a stranger who didn't deserve it. Thank you for standing up to me with dignity and truth. Thank you for being the kind of person I should have been all along. With sincere regret and respect, Catherine. I read the letter twice, tears streaming down my face. Tony handed me a tissue. That's quite a letter. What are you going to do? I don't know. I need to talk to David. That night, I showed David the letter and the check. He read the letter in silence, his expression unreadable. When he finished, he set it down on the table and looked at me. What do you think? I think she's trying. I think she's genuinely trying to change. Whether she succeeds or not, whether she can actually become the person she wants to be, I don't know. But I think the attempt matters. Do you want to cash the check? I want to use it to pay off the rest of Mom's medical bills. And I think I want to write her back. Not to forgive her exactly, but to acknowledge her effort. To tell her that change is possible if she's willing to do the work. David nodded slowly. If that's what you want to do, I support you. But Emma, I'm not ready to have her in my life. I'm not ready to forgive her for abandoning Rebecca and me. Maybe someday, but not now. I understand. And I'm not asking you to forgive her. I'm just saying that I want to respond to her attempt to make amends. That doesn't mean she gets a place at our table or a role in our lives. It just means I'm acknowledging her humanity, the same way I wish she had acknowledged mine. I wrote back to Catherine a few days later. My letter was shorter than hers, but it was honest. I told her that I appreciated her apology and her attempt to make amends. I told her that real change takes time and consistent effort, not just words and money. I told her that if she was serious about becoming a better person, she needed to examine not just her treatment of me, but her treatment of everyone she encountered, especially those with less power and privilege than she had. I told her that David might never be ready to have a relationship with her, and that she needed to accept that as a consequence of her choices. And I told her that I hoped she found peace and purpose in her journey toward becoming the person she wanted to be. I never heard back from her, and I didn't expect to. The letter wasn't about starting a relationship or opening a dialogue. It was about closing a chapter with grace and dignity, the same way I had tried to handle every difficult situation in my life. The $10,000 changed everything for my mother and me. We paid off the remaining medical bills, and for the first time in years, we weren't drowning in debt. My mother's health continued to improve, and 6 months after my wedding, her doctors declared her cancer-free. The relief and joy of that moment was indescribable. We celebrated with a small party, just family and close friends, and I felt like I could finally breathe again. With the financial pressure eased, I was able to cut back to one full-time job at Romano's and take some online classes to finish my degree. David's startup began to take off, and while we were still careful with money, we weren't living paycheck to paycheck anymore. We started talking about buying a small house, about maybe having children someday, about building the life we had always dreamed of. A year after our wedding, Tony offered me a management position at Romano's. It came with a significant raise and benefits, and I accepted gratefully. I loved the restaurant, loved the regular customers who had become like family, loved the feeling of being part of a community. I implemented new policies to protect employees from abusive customers, created a more supportive work environment, and made sure that everyone who worked there felt valued and respected. One evening, about 18 months after the coffee incident, I was closing up the restaurant when an older couple came in just before we locked the doors. They looked tired and a little lost, and something about them reminded me of my own parents before my father left. "We're about to close," I said gently, "but if you're hungry, I can make you something quick." The woman's face lit up with gratitude. "That would be wonderful. We've been driving all day, and we haven't eaten since breakfast." I sat them at a table and brought them water while I went to the kitchen to prepare something simple. As I was cooking, I thought about how different my life was now compared to 18 months ago. I thought about the woman who had thrown coffee at me, about the humiliation and pain of that moment, about how that single incident had somehow led to this moment of being able to help someone else who needed it. I brought the food to the couple, refusing to let them pay. "It's on the house," I said when they protested. "Consider it a welcome to the neighborhood." The woman squeezed my hand, tears in her eyes. "You're very kind. Thank you so much." As I watched them eat, I felt a deep sense of peace. This was who I was. This was who I wanted to be. Someone who saw people, who helped when she could, who treated everyone with dignity and respect. The coffee incident hadn't changed that. Catherine's cruelty hadn't changed that. Nothing could change that because it was woven into the core of who I was, taught to me by a grandmother who understood that character is who you are when no one important is watching. David and I celebrated our second anniversary with a weekend trip to a bed and breakfast in the mountains. It was the first real vacation we had taken since getting married, and it felt like a luxury. We hiked, we talked, we dreamed about the future. On our last night there, as we were sitting on the porch watching the sunset, David turned to me with a serious expression. "I've been thinking about my mother," he said. "Okay, what about her?" "I'm not ready to have a relationship with her. I don't know if I'll ever be ready. But I think I'm ready to let go of some of the anger. You were right when you said that holding on to it only hurts me. I've been carrying this weight around for so long, and I'm tired of it." I took his hand. "That's a big step. I'm proud of you. I've been watching you, seeing how you handled difficult people and situations with such grace. You didn't let what my mother did to you turn you bitter or cruel. You stayed true to who you are. I want to be more like that. I want to be someone who doesn't let past hurt define my future." "You already are that person," I said. "You're one of the kindest, most compassionate people I know. You just sometimes forget to extend that compassion to yourself." We sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I thought about everything that had happened over the past 2 years, all the struggles and triumphs, all the pain and joy. I thought about the woman who had thrown coffee at me, wondering if she had actually changed, if she had done the work she promised to do. I hoped she had, not for my sake, but for hers. Everyone deserved the chance to become a better person, to learn from their mistakes, to grow beyond their worst moments. 3 years after our wedding, my mother passed away peacefully in her sleep. The cancer had returned, more aggressive this time, and despite our best efforts, despite every treatment and prayer, we couldn't save her. The grief was overwhelming, but I found comfort in knowing that she had lived to see me married, had lived to see me happy and settled, had lived long enough to know that I would be okay. At her funeral, I gave a eulogy that talked about her strength, her grace, her unwavering love. I talked about how she had taught me to see the humanity in everyone, to treat others with kindness regardless of how they treated me, to measure success not by wealth or status, but by the impact we have on others. I talked about how she had faced her illness with courage and dignity, never complaining, always thinking of others before herself. After the funeral, David and I scattered her ashes in the park where my grandmother was buried, bringing the 2 women who had shaped my life back together. As we stood there in the quiet morning, I felt their presence around me, felt their love and guidance, felt their pride in the woman I had become. Life continued to move forward. David's startup was acquired by a larger company, and the acquisition made us financially secure for the first time in our lives. We bought a small house in a quiet neighborhood. We adopted a dog from the local shelter. We started talking seriously about having children. We built a life that was simple, but full of love and meaning. 5 years after the coffee incident, I was promoted to general manager of Romano's. It was a full-circle moment, going from the waitress who got coffee thrown at her to the person running the entire restaurant. I used my position to create opportunities for others, to hire people who were struggling, to provide second chances to those who needed them. I remembered what it felt like to be invisible, to be dismissed, to be treated as less than human. And I made sure that no one who worked for me ever felt that way. One afternoon, I was in my office doing paperwork when one of the servers knocked on my door. "Emma, there's someone here to see you. She says it's important." I looked up, curious. Did she give a name? Catherine. Catherine Morrison. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't seen or heard from David's mother in 5 years. I had no idea what she wanted, but I knew I needed to face her. Send her in. Catherine walked into my office, and I was struck by how different she looked. She was still well dressed, but there was a softness to her now that hadn't been there before. Her eyes were kind, her expression humble. She looked like a woman who had done hard work on herself, who had faced her demons and come out the other side changed. Emma, thank you for seeing me. I know I have no right to ask for your time. Sit down, I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. What can I do for you? She sat, her hands folded in her lap. I wanted you to know that I've spent the past 5 years working on myself. I've been in therapy consistently. I've volunteered at homeless shelters and food banks. I've tried to become the person I should have been all along. And I wanted to thank you for your letter, for your honesty, for showing me what real character looks like. I appreciate that. How have you been? I've been better, happier, more at peace with myself. I still have a long way to go, but I'm trying. Every day, I'm trying. She paused, her eyes filling with tears. I also wanted to ask about David. I don't expect him to forgive me or to want a relationship with me. But I wanted you to know that I think about him every day. I pray that he's happy, that he's healthy, that he's living the life he deserves. He is, I said simply. He's doing really well. We both are. I'm glad. You both deserve every happiness. She stood up, preparing to leave. I won't take up any more of your time. I just wanted to tell you that you changed my life that day. Your grace, your dignity, your compassion in the face of my cruelty showed me what I had become and what I needed to change. Thank you for that gift. I walked her to the door. Catherine, I can't speak for David. His relationship with you is his choice to make. But I can tell you that change is possible, that people can grow and become better versions of themselves. I hope you continue on this path. I hope you find peace. She squeezed my hand gently. Thank you, Emma, for everything. I watched her leave, feeling a strange mix of emotions. I didn't know if David would ever be ready to reconnect with his mother, and that wasn't my decision to make. But I was glad she had done the work, glad she had become a better person, glad that something positive had come from that terrible encounter 5 years ago. That night, I told David about Catherine's visit. He listened quietly, his expression thoughtful. How did she seem? Different, genuinely different, like she's done real work on herself. Do you think she's changed? I think she's trying to change. Whether she succeeded or not, I can't say for sure. But the effort seems genuine. David nodded slowly. I'm not ready to see her. I don't know if I'll ever be ready. But I'm glad she's trying. I'm glad she's becoming a better person, even if it's too late for us to have a relationship. That's fair. You don't owe her anything. I know. But maybe someday, when I'm ready, I'll reach out. Not to forgive her or to pretend the past didn't happen, but just to acknowledge that people can change, that growth is possible, that we're all works in progress. I pulled him close, grateful for his wisdom, his compassion, his willingness to hold space for complexity and nuance. We had both grown so much over the past 5 years, had both learned what really mattered in life, and we had done it together, supporting each other through every challenge and celebration. 7 years after our wedding, we welcomed our first child, a daughter we named Grace after my grandmother. Holding her in my arms for the first time, I felt the weight of responsibility and the overwhelming power of love. I thought about the women who had shaped me, about my grandmother and my mother, about the lessons they had taught me. I thought about the kind of person I wanted to be for my daughter, the values I wanted to pass on to her. I wanted to teach her to see people, really see them, regardless of their status or position. I wanted to teach her that kindness is never wasted, that compassion matters, that how we treat others defines who we are. I wanted to teach her that dignity is something we give to others, not something we earn through achievement or wealth. I wanted to teach her that true strength comes from grace under pressure, from maintaining your values when it would be easier to compromise them. As I looked at my daughter's perfect face, I made a silent promise to her and to myself. I would be the kind of mother my mother was to me. I would be the kind of grandmother my grandmother was to me. I would teach her through my actions, not just my words, showing her what it means to live with integrity and compassion. David stood beside me, his arm around my shoulders, tears streaming down his face. She's perfect. She is. And we're going to raise her to be kind and strong and compassionate. Just like her mother, he said, kissing my forehead. Life wasn't perfect. We still had struggles and challenges. We still had moments of doubt and fear. But we faced them together, with love and grace and determination. And we built a life that was meaningful, not because of wealth or status or achievement, but because of the connections we made, the kindness we showed, the love we shared. 10 years after the coffee incident, Romano's celebrated its 50th anniversary. We threw a big party, inviting all our regular customers, all the employees past and present, everyone who had been part of the restaurant's story. As I stood in the dining room, surrounded by people I loved and respected, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought me here. I thought about the young woman I had been 10 years ago, working 3 jobs, exhausted and struggling, invisible to people like Catherine. I thought about how one act of kindness, one choice to help a stranger despite the personal cost, had set in motion a chain of events that changed my life. I thought about how that terrible moment of humiliation had somehow led to this moment of joy and celebration. Sarah found me in the crowd, pulling me into a hug. Look at you, all grown up and successful. I'm so proud of you. I couldn't have done any of this without you. You've been there for everything. That's what best friends do. We show up. She grinned. Remember when you were just a waitress getting coffee thrown at you by terrible customers? I laughed. How could I forget? That was quite a day. It really was. But look where you are now. Look at everything you've built. You're amazing, Emma. I'm just trying to be the person my grandmother taught me to be. Well, she'd be incredibly proud of you. You know that, right? I nodded, feeling tears prick my eyes. I hope so. As the party continued around me, I stepped outside for a moment of quiet. The evening was warm, the sky painted in shades of purple and orange as the sun set. I thought about everything that had happened over the past 10 years, all the growth and change and transformation. I thought about Catherine and wondered if she was still doing the work, still trying to be better. I hoped she was. David found me outside, Grace sleeping in his arms. There you are. Everyone's asking for the boss lady. I smiled, taking Grace from him and holding her close. Let them wait a minute. I just needed a moment to take it all in. It's pretty incredible, isn't it? Everything we've built together. It is. And you know what the best part is? We did it by staying true to ourselves. We didn't compromise our values or change who we are. We just kept showing up, kept being kind, kept treating people with dignity and respect. That's because you showed me how. You showed me that grace and strength aren't opposites, that you can be kind without being weak, that treating people well is the most important thing we can do. We stood there together, our family complete, watching the sunset and feeling grateful for every moment that had led us here. The coffee incident was just a memory now. A story we sometimes told to illustrate how one moment can change everything, how the choices we make define who we are, how kindness is never wasted even when it feels like it is. I had been a waitress who got coffee thrown in her face by a rude customer. I had cleaned up without complaining, had maintained my dignity, had chosen grace over anger. And that choice, that single moment of compassion in the face of cruelty, had revealed something important about both of us. It had revealed my character and her lack of it. It had set in motion a chain of events that led to growth and change and transformation. The woman who threw coffee at me had been David's mother, a fact that could have destroyed us, but instead brought clarity and closure. She had seen me at my most vulnerable and had chosen cruelty. But I had seen her at her worst and had chosen compassion. And in the end, that made all the difference. What an incredible journey from that humiliating moment in the restaurant to this beautiful life I had built. This story reminds us that how we treat others, especially in moments when we think no one important is watching, reveals our true character. It reminds us that kindness is never wasted, that grace under pressure matters, that dignity is something we give to others regardless of how they treat us. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have stopped to help someone in need, even if it meant risking an important opportunity? Have you ever maintained your composure and dignity when someone treated you terribly? Share your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear about times when you chose grace over anger, compassion over revenge. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that true strength comes from maintaining your values even when it's difficult, please show your support by hitting that like button. Your engagement helps us share more stories about real people whose compassion and courage changed their lives. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell so you never miss our inspiring stories about integrity, kindness, and the power of treating everyone with dignity and respect. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.